He told me we were ruined, just one payment away from losing our house. I believed him. I sold my mother's last heirlooms to keep us afloat. Then, 2 weeks after he left me for a simpler life, I found a check in his old desk drawer. It was for $85,000, and it wasn't a payment. It was a bonus. I thought our marriage was a partnership, but I was just an asset waiting to be liquidated. My name is Clara Reed. I am 34 years old, though I feel ancient now. The night it all truly began, the night that fractured my life, started at 2 in the morning. I was woken by a sound that didn't belong. Our Denver house was silent, built solid, but there was a vibration in the floorboards, a rhythm. It was the sound of my husband, Nathan, pacing in the living room. I slipped out of the warm bed, the chill of the house instantly wrapping around me. I pulled my robe tight and walked softly down the hall. The living room was dark, plunged in shadows, except for the cold, sterile blue light pulsing from his laptop screen. Nathan stood in front of it, a frantic silhouette. He wasn't just pacing, he was grinding his knuckles into his temples, running his hands frantically through his hair, muttering words I couldn't understand. Nathan. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. He spun around, and his face in that artificial glow terrified me. It wasn't the face of the man I'd married. This man was gray, his skin slick with a sweat that wasn't from a fever. His eyes were wide, wired, and utterly desperate. "It's gone, Clara," he whispered, his voice hoarse, cracking on the words. "It's all gone. It's collapsed. I am a project manager at Aura Creative Solutions. My job is to organize chaos, to look at a disaster and build a spreadsheet that fixes it. I manage timelines, budgets, and frantic clients. I am, by nature, efficient." My mind tried to click into that mode, but my hands were shaking. "What's collapsed, Nathan? Talk to me. What happened?" He didn't answer. He grabbed my wrist, his grip too tight, and pulled me toward the laptop. "Look," he commanded. "Just look." He explained it in a torrent of specialized, terrifying words. He'd taken out a private loan to leverage some investments for his startup. A sure thing. He'd called it. But there had been a shift in the market, a catastrophic exposure, and now, a margin call. He claimed his investments, the ones that were supposed to be our future, had evaporated, overnight. He forced my gaze to the screen. It was a nightmare of data. He showed me complex charts and dense spreadsheets, knowing I wouldn't understand the specifics. But I understood the visual language. I understood the plunging red arrows that looked like weapons. I understood the alarming negative numbers in parentheses that stretched across the columns. They want it all back. "Clara, by Friday," he said, his finger stabbing the screen. "Every cent. We don't have it. We're wiped out." He finally turned to look at me, his eyes brimming with tears. "We're going to lose the house. They're going to take our home." The room tilted. The walls felt like they were shrinking, the air thinning. Lose the house. This life, the one we had built together, beam by beam. My mind raced, grasping for a lifeline, for an asset. "Your car," I said, the solution immediate and obvious. His classic sports car, the one he polished every Sunday. It was worth at least $60,000. The desperation in Nathan's face vanished, replaced instantly by a flash of anger so hot it was like a slap. "What? No, absolutely not. Nathan, it would cover a huge part of it. We have to." "It was my father's," he shouted, shoving back from the desk so hard his chair squealed against the hardwood floor. "It is the only thing he left me. The only thing—" "You want me to sell that? You don't understand. Do you—" The accusation stung. He made me feel cheap, as if I'd suggested he sell a part of his soul. I recoiled, and just as quickly as the anger had appeared, it dissolved. He saw my retreat, and the strategist took over. The frantic, desperate man was gone, replaced by the soft, persuasive husband I knew so well. He came to me, guiding me away from the glowing screen and onto the sofa. He sat beside me, pulling my cold hands into his. "I'm sorry," he whispered, stroking my hair. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to snap. I'm looking at the end of everything. I'm trying to protect us." He let the silence hang, letting his words sink in. He knew he didn't have to guide the conversation. He had already laid the tracks. He knew I would get there on my own. "My inheritance," I whispered into the dark. He didn't speak. He just gave a slow, pained nod, as if the very idea caused him physical suffering. My mother's legacy. A portfolio of blue-chip stocks that had grown steadily for 15 years, and the land, a small, undeveloped piece of rural Colorado, worthless to most, but it was hers. It was the last solid piece of her I had left in the world. "We can sell the stocks," I found myself saying, my voice hollow. "And the land. Maybe we can use the land as collateral for a new loan to consolidate this, pay them off." Nathan pulled me into him, crushing me against his chest in a grip that felt more like possession than comfort. He buried his face in my neck. "I knew you'd understand," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Clara, you're saving us. You're saving me. I swear to you, I will make this up to you." He held me there in that suffocating embrace. "It's the only way, baby," he whispered. "It is the only path through this. You trust me, don't you? We'll get through this. We always do. Just this once. I promise." I nodded against his shoulder. I felt the tension leave his body in one long, profound shudder. I agreed. I agreed to liquidate everything. I sat there, frozen, feeling the fear crawl deep into my bones. But underneath the fear, I felt a strange, sharp pride. I was a wife. I was doing the right thing. This was the sacrifice that marriage sometimes demanded. We had hit the bottom, and I was the one strong enough to stop the fall. I was saving us. When he finally pulled back, I looked at his face, expecting to see the raw pain of a man who had lost everything, but the frantic energy was gone. The sweat had dried. His eyes were clear, and the muscles in his jaw were relaxed. I told myself it was relief. I believed it was the look of a man who had been given a second chance, pulled back from the edge of the abyss by the woman who loved him. I know better now. That wasn't the expression of a man who had just escaped his debt. It was the calm, steady look of a predator. It was the quiet satisfaction of a con man who had just, finally, closed the most important deal of his life. 6 months ago. It feels like another lifetime, a different person. 6 months ago. My life was perfect. Not perfect in a chaotic, thrilling way, but perfect in an orderly, deliberate way. It was the life I had built piece by piece, a fortress of stability. Our house in Wash Park was a testament to that. It was a classic Denver square, restored with care, the hydrangeas I'd planted blooming in predictable shades of blue and purple. My job at Aura Creative Solutions was stable, challenging in all the right ways. I was good at it. I made sense of complex projects. I delivered on time, and I was respected. And I had Nathan, my ambitious, charismatic husband. Nathan Reed was a force of nature. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and seemed to tilt it on its axis, drawing all the light and conversation toward him. His energy was infectious. His startup, a sleek tech consultancy firm, was always just on the verge of a major breakthrough. He spoke in confident projections and future successes, and his belief was so absolute, it was impossible not to be swept up in it. He was the dreamer. I was the planner. He was the fire. I was the hearth. It felt, for so long, like a perfect balance. His business partner, Simon Vance, was a frequent presence in our perfect life. Simon was the opposite of Nathan. Where Nathan was all polished charm and forward momentum, Simon was rumpled, anxious, and always just trying to keep his head above water. He was Nathan's struggling friend, the operational mind, he'd claimed, who worried over the details. He became a fixture at our dinner table, a near weekly guest. I remember those evenings so clearly now, the smell of the roast I'd prepared, the warm glow of the dining room lights. Nathan and Simon would drink my wine and talk for hours about the risks they were taking, the massive bets they were placing on their vision. Simon would sigh, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair, and complain about cash flow problems and unreliable vendors. He'd look at me, his gaze almost mournful, and say, "I don't know how you do it, Clara. This house, your job, this stability. You're the anchor for both of us. You know that." And Nathan would beam at me, raising his glass. "To my anchor, the one who makes all of this possible." I would blush, feeling a swell of pride. I wasn't just a participant in our life. I was its foundation. I was the safe harbor they returned to after battling the stormy seas of entrepreneurship. They made me feel essential. They made me feel secure. Looking back, I see the performance. I was the audience for a carefully rehearsed play, designed to reinforce my role as the sensible, stable one, the one with the assets. The only discordant note in my perfect symphony was my brother, Julian. Julian, my brilliant, difficult brother. He's a forensic accountant, or at least he was. Until his career imploded a few years ago, he had a mind that saw patterns everyone else missed, a mind that couldn't let go of inconsistencies. He'd uncovered a massive fraud scheme at a major private equity firm, made some wild accusations that turned out to be entirely true, and had been professionally disgraced for his trouble. They buried him in lawsuits, painted him as an unstable conspiracy theorist. He lost everything. He'd met Nathan 3 times. The 3rd time, he called me afterward. "Be careful with him, Clara," he'd said, his voice flat, all business. I'd bristled. "What is that supposed to mean? Julian, you don't even know him." "I know his numbers," Julian replied. He was showing me his pitch deck, his projections. They're too perfect. "Clara, the growth curves, the profit margins. It's all too clean. It feels staged. It's not what a real startup looks like. Real startups are messy." I'd been so angry. I'd hung up on him. Later that night, I'd told Nathan about it, laughing it off as my brother being paranoid again. Nathan had been so understanding, so deceptively warm. He'd pulled me close, his expression full of practiced pity. "He's just jealous, baby," Nathan had said, stroking my hair. "He's a man whose life fell apart, and he sees me building one with you. He can't stand it. He sees conspiracies everywhere because he needs the world to be a plot against him. It's sad, really. We should feel sorry for him." And I did. I'd felt sorry for Julian. I'd felt protective of Nathan. I stopped talking to Julian about my life, about my finances. The distance between us grew from a crack to a chasm, and Nathan was there, cementing every divide. Now, standing in the cold silence of my house, the perfect memories are replaying in my mind, but the color is all wrong. They're curdled. I realize how many small red flags I had painted over, dismissed, explained away. Nathan always taking important client calls in his office with the door locked. The way he'd grimace whenever I offered to help with his company's bookkeeping, saying it was too complex for me to worry about. His quiet, steady insistence, just last year, that I move my mother's entire investment portfolio from her trusted decades-old firm to his new wealth management company. He'd sold it as consolidation, as making our financial picture clearer. He'd said it would be easier for him to manage our joint assets, to help them grow. I believed his secrecy was just the stress of a high-stakes career. I believed his absolute control over our finances was his way of protecting me, of taking the burden off my shoulders. I believed it was concern. It was never concern. It was calculation. It was the long, patient, Meticulous work of a thief casing a house, learning its weak points, befriending the owner, and waiting for the perfect moment to walk in and take everything. We were back in the present. The present was a frantic, blurred race against a deadline. 2 days after Nathan's confession, I spent an entire 8-hour day dismantling my mother's life. It began at the bank, sitting in a sterile glass office with a wealth manager who looked at me with polite pity. He remembered my mother. He had advised her for years. Now, he was advising me as I signed the papers to sell every stock, every bond. I watched 15 years of steady, patient growth her legacy. Her security blanket for me liquidated in a series of keystrokes. Each signature on the digital pad felt like a betrayal. I was setting fire to the past to pay for a future I suddenly wasn't sure of. But what choice did I have? I was saving my marriage. I was saving our home. From the bank, I drove to the county land office. The fluorescent lights hummed, and the air smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Nathan had already prepared the document. He said it was faster this way. It was a complex, dense agreement, full of legal language I couldn't fully parse. Something about using my mother's Colorado land as final stage collateral for a new, consolidated loan. The lender's attorney was there to meet me. He wasn't our lawyer. He represented the people we now owed. He was a man with a severe face and impatient eyes, wearing a suit that was too expensive for this drab office. He didn't introduce himself with a full name, just a firm. He tapped his pen on the document, pointing to the signature line. "It's all standard," he said, his voice flat. "We just need your signature to process the consolidation before the default notice is filed." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the page. "Shouldn't my own lawyer look at this?" His eyes flickered to the clock on the wall. "You're welcome to do that, Mrs. Dreed, but that will delay the filing by at least another day. Your husband made it clear time was of the essence. This is just a formality to secure the new terms." Time was of the essence. The phrase echoed Nathan's panic. The red arrows on the spreadsheet. The threat of losing our home. I was the bottleneck. I was the one holding up the rescue. So I signed. My name. Clara Reed. Looked alien on the page. Like a forgery. We went straight back to the bank. Nathan was there, pacing by the wire transfer desk, his face pale. The land document was faxed. The stock sale was finalized, and the money was in my account. $140,000. It was all there. "The account number," I said to the teller, my voice numb. I read the numbers from the piece of paper Nathan had given me. The name on the account was just a holding company. The creditor. He'd called it. I authorized the transfer. I watched the numbers drain from my balance. In less than a minute, $140,000, my entire inheritance. My mother's careful planning was gone, sent into an electronic void to pay a debt I had never seen, to a name I did not know. The moment the teller handed me the receipt, Nathan grabbed me. He pulled me away from the counter and held me so tightly I could barely breathe. He was shaking. I could feel the tremors running through his entire body. He buried his face in my hair, and his shoulders hitched. I thought he was crying. "You did it, Clara," he whispered, his voice choked with a profound, staggering relief. "You saved us. You saved everything. I swear. I owe you my life. I will never, ever forget this." I held on to him, my own fear finally giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. "We're okay," I said, more to myself than to him. "It's done. We're okay." For 1 week, everything was better than okay. It was like a second honeymoon, but more desperate, more intense. The suffocating tension that had filled our house for months was gone, replaced by Nathan's buoyant, almost giddy gratitude. He was pathologically attentive. He cooked elaborate dinners, the kind he hadn't made since we were first dating. He brought home peonies, my favorite, even though they were out of season and ridiculously expensive. He held my hand constantly. We'd sit on the sofa, and he'd just watch me, shaking his head with a small, adoring smile, as if seeing me for the first time. "My savior," he'd murmur, kissing my forehead. We drank expensive wine to celebrate our new beginning, our fresh start. We made plans. We talked about a trip we'd take in the spring, once his startup was back on its feet. I let myself believe it. I let the warmth of his attention thaw the ice that had formed in my chest. I felt light. We had faced the abyss and stepped back, together. We had survived. The storm had passed, and I, Clara, had been the one to steer us through it. Then, 15 days after the wire transfer, I came home from work. It was a Tuesday. I remember my biggest concern that day was a client presentation that had gone surprisingly well. I was thinking about what to make for dinner. I pulled into the driveway, and my first thought was that I must have parked in his spot. I hadn't. The other side of the garage, the spot where his classic sports car was always parked, was empty. The car he'd refused to sell. The one thing from his father. I felt a prickle of annoyance. Had he gone out, he hadn't texted. I unlocked the front door. The house was silent. Not the normal, peaceful quiet of an empty home. It was a heavy, dead silence. The air was still. "Nathan," I called out, dropping my keys on the console table. "I'm home." My voice didn't just echo, it was swallowed by the quiet. I walked into the kitchen. No note on the counter, no sign of dinner prep. I walked through the living room, a cold knot beginning to tighten in my stomach. Everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. "Nathan." I called again, louder this time, walking up the stairs. I reached our bedroom. The bed was still unmade from the morning, and then I saw it. The door to his closet, which was always slightly ajar, was wide open. I walked toward it, my feet suddenly heavy, as if I were moving through water. I looked inside. It was empty, not just a few shirts gone for a trip. It was cavernous. Every suit, every shirt, every pair of shoes. The hangers were pushed to one side, a bare metal skeleton. I pulled open his drawers, empty. His dop kit was gone from the bathroom counter. His toothbrush was gone. He hadn't just left. He had been systematically erased. The man I had just saved, the man who owed me his life, had vanished. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth, my mind refusing to process the empty hangers. I ran back downstairs, my feet pounding on the hardwood, convinced this was a mistake, a prank, a dream. He was in the kitchen. He had to be. He wasn't. But something else was. On the gleaming white quartz of the kitchen island, placed perfectly in the center, was a single cream-colored envelope. My name, Clara, was written on the front in his familiar, confident script. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't rushed. It was calm. My hands trembled so violently I could barely tear it open. The paper inside was thick, expensive, the kind he used for his business. It wasn't a suicide note. It was a resignation. "I'm sorry," it read. "I can't live with the shame. The debt was simply too large. I've failed you, and I can't bear to watch the fallout. I need to disappear. Don't try to find me." Shame. The word felt hollow, fraudulent. The man I'd held for the past 2 weeks wasn't ashamed. He was relieved. He was attentive. He was celebratory. I fumbled for my phone, my thumb slipping on the glass as I tried to pull up his name. I hit call. It didn't ring. A cold, mechanical voice met my ear. "The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again." Not dead, not out of battery, not in service. He had terminated the line. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. This wasn't grief. This was something else. This was ice water in my veins. I scrolled frantically, my mind racing. Simon, his partner. Simon Vance. Simon would know. He had to know. I dialed Simon's number. The same voice. "The number you have dialed is not in service." They were gone. Both of them. I grabbed my car keys, the ones I had just set down. I ran to the garage, yanked open the car door, and didn't bother with a seatbelt. I sped out of the neighborhood, driving with a desperate singular focus. The office. The startup. The address he was so proud of in the tech center. He had to be there. The city lights blurred, a watercolor smear of neon and traffic. I pushed the car faster than I should have, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I pulled into the business park, my eyes scanning the directories. I found the building. I parked, not even bothering to see if it was a legal spot, and ran to the glass doors. I found the suite number on the building directory. Reed Technologies. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I rounded the corner. And I stopped. It wasn't an office. It was a B-roll. It was a stage set. There was a logo on the wall, but behind the glass door was an empty room, just bare carpet and drywall. A for lease sign was taped to the inside of the glass. I leaned against the opposite wall, the cold plaster a shock to my back. They had never been here. The meetings, the late nights, the big breakthroughs. It was all a fantasy. I stared at the for lease sign, trying to make sense of a world that was suddenly made of cardboard. As I stood there, reeling, my phone vibrated in my hand. A new email. I looked at the screen. It was from my work, from Aura Creative Solutions. The sender was Evelyn Hayes, my boss. The subject line was 2 words, immediate restructuring. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. Dear Clara. It began. It was a wall of corporate text, cold and impersonal. My eyes jumped, catching phrases. Following a recent change in ownership, not yet publicly announced, we are undergoing an immediate and necessary realignment of assets. Your position, project manager, has been deemed redundant, effective immediately. Terminated. Your access to all company systems, including email, will be revoked by the end of the hour. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. I stood in a vacant hallway, outside a fake office, staring at an email that had just erased my career. In the span of 1 hour, I had lost my husband. I had lost my inheritance, my $140,000, and now I had lost my job. I don't remember the drive home. I was an automaton, a machine moving through the required steps. I walked into the empty, silent house, the house I had just saved, the house I now had no way to pay for. I couldn't sit. I couldn't breathe. I needed to destroy something. I needed to move. I stormed through the house, grabbing the few things he had missed. A stray book, a single, forgotten cufflink. I went to the guest room, to the heavy antique desk he'd bought years ago and never once used. I was going to push it over. I was going to break it. I yanked open the top drawer. Empty. The second. Empty. I pulled on the bottom drawer, the deep one. It stuck. I put both hands on it and pulled with all my strength. It shot open, scraping against the runners. It was also empty, except for a stack of old printer paper, yellowed at the edges. And underneath it, a single, crisp, white bank envelope. It was thick. My fingers were clumsy. I picked it up. It wasn't sealed. I flipped open the flap and pulled out the contents. It was a cashier's check. My vision narrowed. The number, printed in stark, unambiguous type, was $85,000. I sank to my knees, the check rattling in my hand. $85,000. We were ruined, he'd said. Wiped out. I looked at the date, printed just below the bank's logo. My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. It froze. The check was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before his 2 a.m. confession. 3 weeks before the margin call. Before the plunging red arrows. My eyes moved to the pay to the order of line. It wasn't for Nathan. It was made out to Simon Vance. And then I saw the memo line, typed neatly in the bottom left corner. 4 words that stole the last bit of air from my lungs. Phase 1 bonus. Aura Project. Aura Project. I read the words again. And again. My mind was a blank, static-filled screen, and then 2 words focused into sharp, terrifying clarity, Aura Creative Solutions. My job, my company, my ex-company, Aura Project. My heart didn't just pound. It felt like it was trying to escape my chest, a panicked bird beating against a cage. I staggered to my feet, the check still in my hand. I thought back. Evelyn Hayes, my boss, the woman who had been my mentor, the one I'd admired for her steel-trap mind and her cool, unflappable demeanor. That coolness. In the last few weeks, it hadn't been professional. It had been cold, utterly frigid. The weekly check-ins that she used to have with me, full of collaborative energy, had become curt, 5-minute summaries. The way she'd looked at me in the elevator just yesterday, not with warmth, but with a strange, flat assessment, like I was a line item she was about to delete, which she had. Your position has been deemed redundant. Following a recent change in ownership, the email, the check, the fake office, Nathan's disappearance. It wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was a sequence. It was a plan. My firing wasn't a coincidence, a simple corporate restructuring. It was the last piece of the puzzle, a final, clinical severance. They had waited until I had signed away my mother's legacy, until I had transferred the $140,000, and then, when I was no longer useful, I was discarded. I was standing alone in an empty room in an empty house, and the scope of the betrayal just kept expanding. It wasn't just my husband. It was my life. My professional life and my personal life had been 2 separate, parallel lines, and they had just converged in the most horrific way. They had been working together. I had never felt so alone, so completely and utterly erased. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, went back to my phone. I scrolled past Nathan's deleted number, past Simon's. I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in almost a year. Julian, my brother, the one who had warned me, the one I had cut out of my life because he had insulted the man who was, at that very moment, planning my destruction. The shame was a physical, burning thing in my throat, but the fear was stronger. He was the only person in the world who could understand this. He lived in this world of shadows and fake numbers. I pressed the call button before I could lose my nerve. It rang. Once. Twice. Clara. His voice was guarded, laced with surprise. Tears I hadn't even known were there started to stream down my face. Julian. My voice broke, a pathetic, small sound. I'm in trouble. I need your help. Julian, I think you were right. You were right about everything. I waited for the recrimination. I waited for the bitter, deserved, I told you so. But it never came. The line was silent for a beat, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. The guarded brother was gone, replaced by the forensic accountant. It was cold, sharp, and focused. Meet me at the public library, the main branch, in 30 minutes. Bring the check. And Clara. Don't tell anyone you spoke to me. Don't call anyone else. Do you understand? Yes, I whispered. Half an hour. The library was an oasis of silence, but my panic was so loud it felt like I was screaming. I found him in the back, in the research section, at a long table with a green reading lamp. He had his laptop already open, a portable hotspot next to it. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, with a permanent tension around his eyes. I didn't say hello. I just slid onto the bench opposite him and pushed the cashier's check across the table. He didn't look at me. He looked at the check. He picked it up, feeling the paper between his thumb and forefinger. He read every line. His face, which had been set in a neutral mask, hardened. A flicker of something dark and familiar passed through his eyes. Recognition. Apex Holdings International, he said. The name was a hiss. I knew it. What is that? I whispered. Who is that? They're a shell company, he said, his eyes still glued to the check. A ghost. They exist to buy, to bury, and to liquidate. I know them. Clara. They're the ones who ruined me. They were the parent company of the firm I went after. They're the ones who funded the lawsuits that destroyed my career. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were like ice. Where did you get this? I told him. Everything. The 2A, confession, the margin call, the fake spreadsheets, the sports car, the $140,000, the land, the lawyer, the empty closet, the terminated phone numbers. And then, the email from Evelyn. His face didn't change as I spoke, but his fingers started to move. He typed with a silent, furious speed. The screen filled with corporate registries, SEC filings, and databases that looked like gibberish to me. Aura Creative Solutions, he muttered. Here it is. He turned the laptop toward me. Apex Holdings International initiated a quiet acquisition of Aura 6 weeks ago. The deal was finalized 2 weeks ago. It was an all-cash purchase, kept out of the press. The change in ownership, I breathed. Exactly, he said. He kept digging, his brow furrowed. They bought your company, Clara, and the bonus check. Aura Project. He stopped typing. He looked from the check in his hand to my face, and the dawning horror I felt was reflected in his eyes. Oh, God, Julian whispered. It wasn't a marketing campaign, was it? It wasn't a client. Aura Project. He tapped the check. This wasn't just Nathan. This was his job. His job was you. The blood drained from my face. I felt dizzy, nauseous. They bought your company to get to you, Julian explained, his voice a low, intense monotone. To control your job, to control you. They put you in a cage from all sides. Your husband, your boss. They were all on the same team. He typed again. A new search query. But why? Why go to all this trouble for $140,000? It's not small, but for Apex, it's pocket change. There has to be... He trailed off. He'd found another public filing, a leadership registry. Apex Holdings. He read. Board of Directors. CEO. He stopped. He just stared at the screen. What? I demanded, my voice cracking. Julian, what is it? He slowly, deliberately, turned the laptop screen to face me. The chief architect of the Aura acquisition, he said, his voice void of all emotion. The new CEO of Apex Holdings International. I looked at the screen, at the name, at the professionally smiling headshot. Evelyn Hayes. I stood frozen in the humming silence of the library. The image of Evelyn Hayes's smiling corporate photo burned into my vision. My boss, my mentor, the CEO of Apex, the architect of my ruin. Julian closed his laptop. The quiet click of the plastic latch was deafening, a final, punctuating sound. This wasn't a marriage, Clara, he said. His voice was no longer the voice of my brother. It was the detached, cold voice of the forensic analyst, the man who had been to this dark place before. This was a hostile takeover, and you were the target asset. I don't understand, I whispered, the words sticking in my dry throat. Why for the money? The $140,000? It's a lot, but for a company like Apex, for Evelyn... No, Julian cut me off, his quiet anger palpable. The $140,000 was nothing. It was bait. It was the cost of business. It was the magician's misdirection to make you look at the wrong hand. He leaned forward, his eyes, so much like mine, now looked like chips of ice. They didn't care about your stocks, Clara. Evelyn wanted the land. The land. I was bewildered. My mother's land. It's 40 acres of scrub in the middle of nowhere. It's worthless. It doesn't even have water access. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped Julian's lips. Worthless. He turned the laptop back around and opened it, his fingers flying across the keys. He pulled up geological surveys, county planning maps, and articles I couldn't understand. It's not worthless, Clara. It's sitting on top of one of the largest, richest, and most accessible undeveloped lithium deposits in North America. He pointed to a dense colored overlay on a map. This survey was published 8 months ago, kept very quiet. They're not just worth something. Those 40 acres are potentially worth billions. Billions, with a B. It's the kind of asset that changes energy markets. And your mother, our mother, owned it outright. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, lithium, batteries. But she never said anything, I stammered. She left it to me. Because she was smart, Julian said, his voice sharpening. She was smart, and she was paranoid in all the right ways. She knew people like Evelyn Hayes existed. She put that land into an ironclad trust. I remember looking it up when she passed. I thought the terms were overly complex. I was wrong. He was pacing now, in his mind, connecting the last of the dots. The trust was specific. The land could not be sold. Not by you, not by anyone, not for another 50 years. Mom wanted it protected, but she left a single vulnerability, a single, tiny loophole. He stopped and looked at me, and his face was a mask of cold pity. It couldn't be sold, but it could be seized. It could be taken, legally, if it was put up as collateral against a legitimate, outstanding debt. A debt that was then, subsequently, defaulted on. The blood drained from my face. The room went cold, the margin call, the private loan, the frantic, late-night confession. It was all fake, I whispered, the realization a physical blow. Of course it was fake. Julian's voice was a low growl, and he slammed his hand on the table. The sharp sound made a nearby student jump. The debt was manufactured. The spreadsheets were theater. Nathan's 2 a.m. panic was a performance, scripted by Evelyn. They needed you desperate. They needed you terrified of losing your house. They needed you in a state of panic so you would sign anything to make it stop. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. That lawyer at the county office, the one who rushed you, the loan document you signed, the one using the land as final stage collateral. He said it was a formality. I choked. He lied. That creditor you were consolidating with, that holding company you wired your $140,000 to, let me guess, Apex Financial Services or something similar. I nodded, numb. You didn't pay off a debt. Clara, you created one. You signed a brand new, perfectly legal loan agreement directly with a subsidiary of Apex Holdings. You took their money, and you secured that loan with the only thing Evelyn ever wanted, the land. I finally understood. The $140,000 wasn't my money paying them. It was a circular, laundered transaction. They gave me the money for the loan. I used my own money to pay off the fake margin call, and in the confusion, I signed away the rights to my land. And Nathan. The name was poison. How long? Julian's face was grim. How long have you been together? 6 years, I said. We met 6 years ago. 6 years. He let the words hang in the dead air between us. This wasn't a marriage, Clara. It was an insertion, an operation. Evelyn found him, a charming, ruthless, amoral man, and she aimed him at you. His entire life with you was his job. His job was to build a relationship, to gain your absolute trust, to become your husband, to get his name onto your financials, and to be the believable, terrified man who could sell you on your own financial ruin. The dinners. Simon, you're the anchor for both of us. The warning from Julian. His numbers are too perfect. It's staged. It was all staged. Every laugh, every I love you, every shared dream. They didn't just trick you out of your inheritance, Julian summarized, his voice flat and brutal. They used your inheritance as the processing fee for the real crime. He tapped the $85,000 check still lying on the table. This was Nathan's commission, a bonus for Phase 1. He wasn't paid to love you, Clara. He was paid to bankrupt you. He was paid to make you sign that paper, and you did. The library's quiet was a physical weight, pressing down on me. I stared at the check, at the crisp, printed $85,000. It was the only solid thing in a life that had become smoke. But why, I finally asked, my voice a dry rasp. Why leave it, Julian? If this was his bonus, why didn't he take it with him? Why leave it for me to find? Julian leaned back, folding his arms. He stared at the check, not as a piece of paper, but as a chess move he was trying to deconstruct. Arrogance, he said, the word clipped. He just pulled off a multi-billion-dollar heist, bankrupted his wife, and got away clean. He probably felt invincible. He got sloppy. He overlooked it in his rush. In his rush. I shook my head, the image of the neatly folded note on the counter flashing in my mind. No, his closet was empty. Every drawer was clean. The note was precise. He wasn't sloppy. He was meticulous. Then it's the other option, Julian said, leaning forward again. He left it on purpose, or he was hiding it. He tapped the pay to the order of line. Look, it's not made out to Nathan Reed. It's to Simon Vance. His partner, I said. The struggling one. The handler, Julian corrected, his voice flat. Evelyn is a CEO. She's a brilliant, ruthless strategist. She would never, ever place her entire multi-billion-dollar operation in the hands of a single charming con artist like Nathan without a failsafe. She wouldn't trust him. Simon wasn't his partner. Clara. Simon was his babysitter. Simon's job was to keep Nathan on target, to report back, to make sure the Aura project, which was you, stayed on schedule. This $85,000, this was Simon's payment for keeping the asset under control. The words, the asset, you, under control, hit me like physical blows. So why did Nathan have it? I whispered. If it was Simon's? Exactly, Julian said, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. Infighting. The con is over, the score is settled, and the thieves are turning on each other. My guess Nathan was angry. He found out his partner was getting a bonus he didn't know about, so he intercepted it. He was holding it, maybe as leverage over Simon. Maybe he was just greedy. Julian stood up then, the need to move, to do, radiating from him. He paced the small area between the bookshelves. A man like Nathan, he said, thinking aloud. A man whose entire life is a lie. He doesn't trust anyone. He can't. He knows his partners are just as crooked as he is. He would never, ever believe that Evelyn and Simon would just let him walk away clean. He'd be terrified they'd do to him exactly what they did to you, cut him loose, erase him. He stopped and looked at me, a new, intense light in his eyes. He has to have an insurance policy. He has to, a separate ledger, a black box, a dead man's switch, somewhere. Clara. He has a private stash of his own. He didn't wait for my answer. He sat back down at his laptop, and the man I knew as my brother was gone, replaced by the obsessive, relentless analyst who had lost his own life to this hunt. He was meticulous, you said. That means he has a financial trail, not the fake one he showed you, his real one. For an hour, he worked. He wasn't just searching public records, he was in the dark corners of the web, using logins and search strings that I didn't recognize. He was tracking the man who had been my husband. People like Nathan, they create fake companies, Julian muttered, his eyes locked on the screen. But they pay for their real vices. He'd need a place, a physical place, safe, secure, climate-controlled, off the grid, but accessible. He found it. A single recurring monthly charge on an obscure credit card, one registered to an LLC I'd never heard of. The charge was to a high-end maximum security storage facility. Apex Climate Storage. Julian read, his lip curling. He's not just arrogant. He's sentimental. He hid it right under their name. The unit was rented under an alias. How do we get in? I asked. We don't, Julian said. Not without a warrant. I stood up, my mind suddenly clear, a memory surfacing. The desk, I said. When I found the check, in the old desk he never used, there was a small wooden box in the back of the drawer, full of old keys. He told me they were from his college apartment, just junk he kept. I'd grabbed the whole box, shoved it in my bag in my blind rage to clear his things. I dumped my purse on the library table. The small, carved wooden box skittered out. I opened it. Inside, among a dozen old, tarnished house keys, was one that was different. A flat, silver key attached to a small, gray plastic fob with a number stamped on it. The drive to the storage facility was silent. It was a fortress of white concrete and mirrored glass. Inside, it was cold, sterile, and silent as a tomb. Julian handled the keypad, using a code he'd apparently found in his research. We walked down a long, white, fluorescent-lit corridor. We found the unit. My hand was shaking as I held up the key. The number on the fob matched the number on the door. I slid the key into the lock. It fit. I took a deep breath. Stand back, I said. I twisted the key, unlatched the heavy bar, and pulled the metal door up. It rattled, the sound echoing in the hallway. I expected to be hit with the smell of dust and old furniture. I expected boxes, paintings, clothes. The unit was almost empty. And it wasn't dark. A series of small, blinking green and blue lights pulsed in the back. It was cold, the air humming with the sound of fans. In the center of the small 10-by-10 space sat a single, professional, 4-foot-tall black server rack, a network switch, a power backup, a stack of gleaming black hard drives, all networked together. On a small metal shelf next to it sat a sleek, digital multi-channel audio recorder. Julian stepped in, his mouth open. He walked forward and put his hand on the side of the server. It's warm, he whispered, in awe. It's running. It's live. I just stared at the recorder, at the wires that snaked from it to the server. What is this? I asked. What is he storing? Julian turned to me, a look of dawning, almost fearful, respect on his face. This is his insurance policy. This is his black box. He pointed to the recorder, then to the server. He didn't just keep a separate set of books. Clara. He kept a receipt. The truth hit me, colder and harder than anything else that day. He recorded them. I breathed. He recorded everything, Julian confirmed, his eyes wide. Every phone call, every strategy meeting, every secret conversation with Evelyn, every word he ever spoke to Simon. He ran a hand over the hard drives. Your whole marriage. He was building a blackmail case against the very people who hired him to con you. We didn't stay in the storage unit. It was too cold, too exposed. Julian, with the quiet competence of a man who had done this before, began the painstaking process of dismantling the server. He photographed every connection before unplugging a single wire. We carried the components out, piece by heavy piece, hiding them under old blankets in the trunk of my car. We looked like two thieves, and I realized, with a start, that we were stealing back the evidence of my life. We drove to his apartment, a small, secure condo I hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. It was the apartment of a man who lived his life on a defensive footing, sparse, obsessively clean, with a reinforced door and tinted security film on the windows. He set up the server rack in his small home office. I watched him work, his fingers flying across a keyboard, navigating systems I didn't understand. He bypassed encryption keys, cloned the drives, and isolated the data. It took hours. The sun had long since set, and the city lights of Denver were a cold, indifferent glitter outside his window. He was thorough, Julian said, his voice a low monotone. He backed up everything. 4 years of data, all audio, all meticulously labeled by date and participant. He turned to me, his face illuminated by the glow of 3 different monitors. "Where do we start?" "At the beginning," I said. My voice was hoarse. I didn't recognize it. He clicked on the oldest file, dated 4 years ago. The audio quality was perfect, captured by a high-end microphone. It wasn't a phone call. It was a meeting. I heard the clink of ice in a glass, the murmur of what sounded like a restaurant. And then I heard her voice, Evelyn Hayes. "The target is Clara Reed," she said. It was the same voice I'd heard in 100 marketing meetings, crisp, analytical, and completely calm. "She's financially stable. She has a high-yield, unencumbered asset portfolio from her mother, and she's professionally reliable. She's also sentimental." A man's voice, Nathan's voice, the voice that had whispered, "I love you," 1,000 times. "She's close to her brother, Julian. He's a problem. He's an accountant." "He's a disgraced accountant," Evelyn corrected him, her voice like a shard of glass. "But he is a problem. That's your first objective. Nathan, you will isolate her from him. You will make her see him as a paranoid failure. You will make her trust you more than her own blood. You have 3 years. Make her fall in love with you. Make her feel so completely safe that when the time comes, she will sign whatever you put in front of her to protect that safety." I made a sound, a choked, strangled sob. Julian didn't stop the recording. He just put his hand on my shoulder, a heavy, grounding weight, and hit next. We listened as my life was plotted like a corporate strategy. We listened to Nathan and Simon, his handler, giving their progress reports to Evelyn. We listened to them laugh. That was the worst part. The laughter. "She's so beautifully predictable," I heard Nathan say, his voice warm with an amusement that turned my stomach. We were 2 years into our relationship. "All she wants is the house, the stable job, the weekend dinners. She's desperate for stability. She'll fight to the death to protect it." "She's the perfect anchor," Simon's voice chimed in. "She'll hold the boat steady while we gut it from the inside out. Did you see her face when I told her I admired her stability? She practically glowed. They mocked my job. They mocked the meals I cooked for them. They mocked my grief for my mother, discussing how the inheritance had matured nicely and how my emotional attachment to the worthless land was the key that would unlock the whole thing. We skipped forward to 6 months ago, the planning stage of the Aura project. It was the 3 of them, Evelyn, Nathan, and Simon, and they were scripting my ruin. They were workshopping the 2A, confession. "The margin call is the most believable," Evelyn said, her voice clinical. "It's complex, it's fast, and it creates a specific, terrifying deadline. It will induce the precise level of panic we need." "I need to look broken," Nathan said. I recognized the tone. He was brainstorming. He was collaborating. "I have to be at the end of my rope. I have to be shattered." "You need to cry, Nathan," Evelyn commanded. "You need to be pacing. You need to look at her like she's your only lifeline. And you must refuse to sell the car. That is the key. It makes the sacrifice of her land feel like her idea. You cannot be the one to suggest it. She has to offer it. It must be her choice. It's the only way the transfer of collateral holds up against the trust's provisions." I went to the bathroom and was violently sick. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at the stranger in the mirror. When I came back, Julian was sitting, his head in his hands. "There's one more," he said, his voice muffled. "We're almost at the end. This file. It was created yesterday, the day before he left." He clicked play. The audio was different. It wasn't a clear recording. It was muffled, distant, a pocket recording. And it was only 2 voices, Evelyn and Simon. Nathan was not there. "He's getting greedy," Evelyn said. Her voice was ice. "He's asking for a larger percentage. He's talking about a long-term partnership now that the collateral is secured. He thinks this makes him a partner." A sigh. Simon. He's arrogant. Evelyn. He thinks he's untouchable. He thinks he was the only one playing a game. He's holding that bonus check I was supposed to get, the $85,000. He thinks it's leverage. We have the signature, Evelyn stated, as if closing a file. The land is collateralized. The loan default is scheduled for 30 days from now. He is officially a loose end, a very expensive, very talkative loose end. My blood stopped. My heart, which had been pounding, went completely still. So, what's the plan? Simon asked. The plan is simple. Evelyn replied. Let him run. He's already paranoid. That's why he's recording us. Let him take the cash he's been skimming from the project account. It makes him look guilty. It makes his suicide note story, the one he's been planning for Clara, all the more believable. We'll let him run for 1 week. Then, we freeze his offshore accounts. We report him to our contacts as a fugitive, and we let nature take its course. He'll be gone by Christmas. Julian stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute, heavier than stone. Julian looked at me, his eyes wide with the horrifying final realization. Nathan hadn't been running from me. He wasn't fleeing his guilt. He was fleeing them. He must have heard it. He must have known they were planning to cut him out, to erase him completely. The man who had conned me was, in the end, being conned himself. That note. I need to disappear. Don't try to find me. It wasn't a goodbye letter to a wife he had betrayed. It was an alibi. It was a false trail, thrown over his shoulder in a desperate, panicked sprint to save his own life. We sat in the dark of Julian's apartment for a long time. It was almost 4 a.m. The glowing screens of the server had finally been powered down. The audio files copied and secured. The recordings played over and over in my head, a soundtrack of my own destruction. The tears were gone. I was hollowed out, scoured clean by the truth. What was left wasn't grief. It was a cold, hard substance I didn't recognize. It was rage. Julian stood up, the first to move, and began to pace the small room. "This is it," he whispered, his voice vibrating with a terrible, focused energy. "This isn't just a domestic con. Clara, this is a federal case. We have conspiracy. We have wire fraud. We have securities fraud. We have real estate fraud. This is a RICO case." I looked up at him, the legal terms sounding foreign. "So we go to the police. We take this. We stop them." "No." Julian's voice was sharp, absolute. "We can't. Not the Denver PD. Think about it. Evelyn Hayes, CEO of Apex Holdings. She didn't just buy your company. Clara. She has influence. She has money. She has contacts. We walk into the local precinct, that evidence is lost by noon. The report gets buried, and Evelyn gets a very quiet, very friendly phone call letting her know we have the tapes. We would be destroyed before we even filed the report. He was right. The web was too big, and we were too small. We were 2 people against a billion-driving corporation. "So what do we do?" I asked, the hollowness inside me turning to despair. "We just let them win." "No," Julian said. He went to his desk and pulled out a small, black, encrypted hard drive. "We don't go local, we go national. When Apex ruined my career, I built a network. I found other people they'd burned, people who hate them as much as I do, people in the press." He plugged the drive into his secured laptop, not the one we'd used for the server. "I can't walk into the FBI building, but I know a journalist in New York who can. Someone I trust with my life." He made a call, not on his cell phone, but through an encrypted voice-over IP line that left no trace. He didn't use names. "It's me," he said. "And it's Apex. I have them. The whole operation. It's bigger than the last one, and this time, it's criminal. I need a face-to-face. Not here. Neutral ground. And I need you to bring the law with you. I want the Attorney General's office." The next 48 hours were a blur. The journalist, a woman whose name was synonymous with taking down corporate giants, recognized the payload in Julian's voice. She made the arrangements. Julian and I, traveling under assumed names, flew to New York. The cloned hard drives, the server, and Nathan's digital recorder were in a heavy, locked Pelican case that Julian never let out of his sight. The meeting wasn't in a skyscraper. It was in a safe house, a nondescript apartment in Queens provided by the New York State Attorney General's office. The journalist was there, 2 federal prosecutors from the Southern District were there, and there was a quiet, intense man who introduced himself as being from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I felt like I was watching a movie of my own life. Julian, finally in his element, set up the equipment. He didn't start with the emotions. He started with the land. He laid out the geological surveys, the lithium reports, the structure of my mother's trust, and the single loophole. Then, he played the audio. He played the tape of Evelyn, Nathan, and Simon scripting my 2 a.m. panic. He played the tape of them laughing at my predictable nature. And then, he played the final recording, the one of Evelyn and Simon, alone, discussing Nathan as a loose end and planning to cut him out. When the audio clicked off, the room was utterly silent. The 2 prosecutors stared at each other. The journalist was writing so fast her pen was a blur. "This is a conspiracy of breathtaking arrogance," one of the prosecutors said, her voice awed. "It's a gift. We have them on conspiracy to commit fraud, clear as day." "But," the other prosecutor said, holding up a hand, "what we have is a past crime. The conspiracy is complete. Her defense will be that she was duped by Nathan Reed, that he was a rogue agent, that she discovered his fraud, and that she has already taken steps to sever ties with him." "His disappearance plays right into that," the FBI agent added, his eyes on me. "She'll say he fled when he knew she was on to him. Right now, she's clean. The default on your loan isn't scheduled for another 3 weeks. She hasn't executed the final step of the fraud. We need her to," the first prosecutor said. "We need to catch her in the act. We need to prove, today, that she knows the collateral was obtained fraudulently and that she is still actively trying to seize it." "We need a new trigger," the FBI agent said. "We need to make her panic." My mind flashed back to the desk. The envelope. The number. $85,000. I reached into my bag. My hand was perfectly steady. I pulled out the cashier's check and placed it on the table. The agent looked at it. "What's this?" "It's bait," I said. My voice was low and clear. "We heard them on the tape. Evelyn knows Nathan stole this from Simon. She thinks it's a loose end. She thinks Simon is angry about it. She's monitoring them both, terrified they'll turn on her." I pushed the check toward the center of the table. "What happens if the desperate, abandoned, and broke wife suddenly finds this check and, not knowing what else to do, she walks into Simon's bank and deposits it into his account?" A slow smile spread across the FBI agent's face. "She panics," he whispered. "She thinks Simon is double-crossing her," Julian said, picking up the thread. "Or that I'm making a move. That the plan is unraveling and we're trying to get the money." "It's the perfect catalyst," the prosecutor said, her eyes gleaming. "It forces her hand. It makes her move on the land before she thinks she'll lose it." The plan was set. We were no longer victims. We were hunters. We flew back to Denver, but this time, we were not alone. A federal protection detail watched us from a discreet distance. The next morning, I was wired for sound. I walked into Simon Vance's bank, playing the part I had been cast in from the beginning, the confused, heartbroken wife. I approached the teller, the check trembling in my hand, a tremor that was only half acting. "My husband, he left me," I whispered, letting a tear fall. "I found this. It's for his business partner, Simon Vance. I don't know what to do. I think I'm supposed to deposit it for him." The teller, full of sympathy, processed the deposit. The $85,000 trap was set. We waited in a surveillance van parked down the street from Julian's building. The FBI agent sat at a console, his headphones on. My heart was a stone in my chest. "It's done," the agent said, his voice flat. The deposit triggered an automatic high-value fraud alert on Vance's account, an alert that, according to his bank records, is mirrored directly to Apex Holdings' chief financial officer and to Evelyn Hayes. We sat in the humming silence. 10 minutes passed. 20. "We've got a call," the agent said, his voice tensing. "She's not waiting. She's calling Simon Vance on his cell. We're on the line." He patched the audio through the van's main speaker. First, Simon's voice, hesitant. "Hello." Then, Evelyn's. But this was not the cool, clinical CEO. This was the voice of a cornered animal. It was high-pitched, sharp, and full of pure, undiluted panic. "What did you do?" she shrieked, so loudly I flinched. "The check, the $85,000 check. She just deposited it." "What is she doing? What are you doing? Is she on to us?" "What?" Simon sounded terrified, utterly confused. "I don't know. I haven't talked to her. I thought Nathan—" "You idiot," Evelyn screamed. "She's not supposed to be doing anything. She's supposed to be broken quiet. This changes the timeline. She's moving. She must be talking to a lawyer. She's going to try and void the paperwork. She's going to lock up the asset." The agent caught my eye and gave a single, slow nod. This was it. "We're accelerating," Evelyn commanded, her voice dropping to a low, vicious snarl. "I want the default pushed up. Call the attorneys. I want that land seized. I don't care what it takes. Get that land now. Get it today, before she can stop us." The agent ended the recording. He pulled off his headset and looked at Julian, then at me. "That," he said, "is the smoking gun." It was her own voice, a direct admission that she knew the paperwork could be voided, that the claim was fraudulent, and a direct order to expedite the crime. She hadn't just built the trap. We had just recorded her throwing herself into it. The reckoning was not a whisper. It was a thunderclap. The journalist Julian had trusted in New York did not bury the lead. Her story dropped simultaneously online and on the morning news feeds. A coordinated detonation. The headline was a cannon shot. "The Lithium Plot. Apex CEO accused of faking marriage to steal billions." It was a story of corporate greed, high-stakes fraud, and the kind of intimate psychological betrayal that made the public stop and stare. The story didn't just name Apex Holdings. It named Evelyn Hayes. It detailed the entire Aura project, and it used Nathan's own recordings leaked with perfect precision by the Attorney General's office as the undeniable proof. The federal agents moved in at 9:01 a.m. just as the story hit the stock market ticker. Apex stock froze, then plummeted, a red arrow plunging just like the fake ones Nathan had shown me. Federal agents, in windbreakers marked FBI, executed simultaneous raids on the headquarters of Aura Creative Solutions and the executive suites of Apex Holdings. My old colleagues at Aura, the ones who had whispered about my sudden redundancy, stood in shock as agents confiscated servers, their faces pale. But the main event was Evelyn. We watched it on a live feed, Julian and I, from the safety of the AG's office. She was in the middle of a quarterly board meeting, doubtless trying to contain the fallout from the news story. The doors to the boardroom burst open. Evelyn looked up, her face a mask of irritation, ready to dismiss an aide. And then she saw the badges. She saw the news cameras rolling in behind the agents. The lead agent read the charges: conspiracy, wire fraud, securities fraud, racketeering. Her face, usually so controlled, so impassive, went completely blank. It was the absolute, profound shock of a master chess player who had just been checkmated by a pawn. The cameras zoomed in, mercilessly, as they cuffed her hands behind her back. That image, the CEO of Apex, the woman who had tried to steal billions, her eyes empty and void, was on every screen in the country by noon. They found Simon Vance in his downtown penthouse apartment, not defiant, but terrified. He was in his pajamas, frantically trying to shatter hard drives with a hammer when they kicked his door in. He crumpled at the first sight of the badges, weeping before they even had the cuffs on. Then, there was Nathan. He didn't last long. With Evelyn and Simon in custody, and his own recordings playing on the news, he had nowhere to run. The FBI found him 3 days later in a cheap, run-down hotel off the Las Vegas Strip, hiding under his alias. He was out of money. The offshore accounts Evelyn had set up for him had, as she'd planned, been frozen. He was trapped. They brought him back to Denver in chains. The final confrontation wasn't what I'd expected. I didn't want to see him, but the prosecutors insisted it would help. I agreed, but on my terms. I would go in, with my new lawyer funded by Julian at my side. He was sitting in a cold, gray interrogation room, wearing an orange jumpsuit. The man I saw wasn't the charismatic, brilliant force of nature I had married. He looked old. He looked 10 years older than he had just weeks ago. His hair was lank, his skin was gray, and his eyes were just the eyes of a desperate, cornered rat. He looked up when I entered. A flicker of that old, manipulative hope ignited in his face. "Clara," he whispered, leaning forward, the chains on his wrists rattling. "Clara, thank God. They betrayed me. They betrayed us. I was coming back for you. I swear. I was trying to protect you. I kept the recordings to protect you." I stood there, just outside his reach, and I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The love was gone. It was just empty. I looked at this hollowed-out man who had built his life on a foundation of lies. "You didn't fail at loving me." "Nathan," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the fluorescent lights above us. "You just failed at betraying me completely." The hope in his eyes died, replaced by the dull, flat comprehension of his final defeat. The trial was a formality. With Nathan's own meticulous insurance policy, 4 years of audio recordings as the prosecution's primary evidence, he had no choice but to testify. He took the stand against Evelyn and Simon in exchange for a reduced sentence. He sang. He detailed every meeting, every strategy, every single lie from the moment Evelyn first hired him. The judge was merciless. Evelyn Hayes, convicted on all counts, including the RICO charges, was sentenced to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. The corporation she built was dismantled, its assets seized. Simon Vance, for his role as the handler, received 18 years, and Nathan, for his cooperation, received 7, the fraudulent loan, the one that had been the entire point of the conspiracy, was declared null and void. The signatures I had made under duress were erased. The title to my mother's land was returned to me, free and clear. 6 months later, I stood on that worthless piece of scrubland. It was quiet, the wind moving through the dry grass. I had sold it, not to a shark like Apex, but to a green energy consortium, a company that would actually use the lithium to build batteries for a better future. The price was, as Julian had predicted, in the 9-figure range. I didn't keep it all. I set up a trust, a very specific one, in the name of the only man who had ever told me the truth, even when I wouldn't listen. The Julian Reed Foundation for Integrity. Its mission is simple: to provide pro bono legal and financial support for forensic accountants and corporate whistleblowers who are targeted and retaliated against for telling the truth. Julian runs it. I've never seen him look so alive. I kept the house, my house, and I still work at Aura, or what's left of it, rebuilt by the employees. I'm still a project manager. I still believe in stability. But now, I build it on a foundation of my own. Thank you all for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.